Hello, friends. Hopefully, there's some folks out there watching. My name is Hans Rueffert, and we are live in my kitchen, which is where I'm supposed to be, morally, legally, and by decree. But I'm happy to be here. This is my favorite place to be. And if you are joining me via Facebook or whatever device, would love to have you chime in. Just say hello. You can do little smiley faces or rainbow poop emojis or whatever you feel like sharing. But we wanted to kind of continue this. We do a series regularly through the Gastric Cancer Foundation called the Gesundheit Kitchen, and in sort of the current atmosphere of people staying in their homes, there's sort of this renewed focus on cooking and eating together, which I think is one of the positive silver linings, the good side effects of this. And it's something that I kind of wanted to share my enthusiasm for. But at the same time, I've sort of been challenging myself to utilize the items that I have in my pantry. And we have all gotten a bit spoiled to just running to the grocery store every time we feel like, oh, you have a craving or an urge. And so we end up getting this sort of massive library, or, almost like catacombs of ingredients that were either on sale or we were enthusiastic about it or whatever. And then we sort of forget about it. But so the idea was creating some foods, utilizing on-hand items, and try to think of nutritious, delicious, and kind of fun ways. Because ultimately it can be, nutritious, or it could be textbook, has high in iron, or whatever the properties are. But if it's not delicious and if you don't enjoy doing it, then what's the point? So that's kind of the theme of today, and we have our friend Ellen Steinberg is on hand here to answer any nutrition questions, which is something that I'm a bit of a nerd on, but she has the doctorate, and so I always kind of lean on her, even though she's much shorter than me, so it's hard to lean on her. But I do like to lean on her when it comes to the science behind all of this crazy stuff that I'm talking about. Now, normally, I focus on fresh. I mean, that is like almost sort of my tagline. But in this situation, fresh is not always the option. So as far as nutrition goes, we like fresh first, and then frozen, and then canned, and so it sort of goes down the line. But in a time where fresh ingredients are not always readily available, it's great to be able to utilize some of these canned or dried or frozen ingredients. So that's what today's kind of demo is going to be, and I'm going to show you a couple different ways to use one dish in multiple ways. And I love the idea that you cook once and eat twice, or sometimes 3 or 4 times. So with that in mind, during this sort of quarantine cuisine time frame, I have been spending a lot of time cooking beans and rice and grains like sorghum and millet and amaranth and spelt. And I love doing those things because they are high in protein, plant-based protein, easy to digest, but they also are pretty universally interchangeable. So changing things up, not just white rice, not just navy beans, trying to go through, again, the pantry of things that I have. I love navy beans. They're inexpensive. If you're good at finding bargains, you can find navy beans for as little as 50 cents a pound, which is fantastic. So I literally bought a 24-pound box of navy beans about a month ago, prior to any of this stuff, because that's how many beans that I either eat for myself or I fix for other people. But they're great to have on hand because they do have a shelf life, but that's way out in the future. And with a little bit of forethought, you can put this together. I typically soak them overnight. And I do so, and when I soak them overnight, I always include a bay leaf in with the soaking liquid, and then you pour off the liquid after you've soaked it, and you put in fresh water. You bring it to a boil again with bay leaves in there. And the reason for the bay leaf is not only for flavor, it is, and I'm going to let Ellen talk about this in just a little bit, is something called oligosaccharides, or maybe it's oligosaccharides. But sometimes that's where the discomfort and the gas can come from. But by, number one, changing out that water, so you're using a different water when you cook the beans, that by adding this, it also will reduce the amount of gassiness that comes. That's a technical term, right? The gassiness that comes with the beans. So that's usually the thing that everybody remembers about beans, the whole musical fruit part of it. But as far as, again, being plant-based protein that's easy to digest, it's high in an insoluble fiber, so if you have problems with your blood sugar, it is great to kind of slow down how quickly your body metabolizes that glycemic index, the excess sugar that's in there. In your diet, this would help slow that down. And plus, we've all heard that fiber acts like a brush as it goes through. And so always love to talk about bowels when we're talking about food. But a big pot of beans like this is one of these 2-pound bags, makes a whole huge pot full of beans. And these can be used in chilies and stews. You can use them as hummus. You don't have to have chickpeas, although those are great too. But the white beans, either the Great Northern white beans or the navy beans, are just a great interchangeable, universal kind of a thing. You could also use canned beans for what I'm about to do, but if you're using canned beans, just make sure that you're rinsing them multiple times to get that liquid out again, because that's where some of the gas is included. So in we go with that ingredient, now that I've talked a whole bunch about beans. And this is a crazy simple. I'm doing a cup and a cup and a cup and a cup. I never measure anything. Like, that is, for me, almost like pulling teeth. But for simplicity's sake, I've already measured everything to a simple cup apiece. But the point really being is sort of equal parts. And obviously, this is not rocket science. You can take this in any direction. But starting with a cup of these beans. Now, again, these have been soaked and cooked, so we're not putting dried beans in here. And I only stress that because one time I forgot to say that, and someone said, well, I tried making it, it was way too crunchy. Yes, it would be amazingly crunchy if you forget to soak and rehydrate, or again, if you're using canned beans, those are already cooked. Now, to that, I'm adding any sort of a prepared grain. Now, this could be brown rice. In my case, I'm using barley. Now, barley does have a bit of gluten in there, so if you are gluten sensitive, you could switch this out for whole grain sorghum, or for quinoa, or for millet, or any one of these. Again, they have a lot of plant-based protein. They're chewy, they're dense, they have a wonderful mouthfeel. So any grain that you have on hand prepared, so I'm not putting the dried grain in there. And rather than spending time talking about how you prepare those individual grains, every box, and for example, this is quick barley that I use today, but if you have whole grain barley, it just takes a little bit longer. The instructions are on there. This one cooks in 10 minutes. And I typically, on all of these things, I go ahead and cook the entire package, unless I have a 25-pound bag. But if it's a small, sort of family-sized package, I'll cook the entire thing knowing that I have excess barley or brown rice or any of those grains that I can use in veggie burgers, in, again, soups and salads. It's just an interesting texture, flavor profile. They all have, their own unique characteristics. So a cup of beans, a cup of cooked barley, cup of frozen chopped spinach. Now again, if you've got tons of fresh spinach, use it. But in this case, I'm again trying to use from sort of on-hand items. When we were talking about this, somebody said, well, your pantry is probably going to be really weird compared to mine. And to be fair, I probably do have some weird things in my pantry. I do have some weird things in my pantry, but there are these ubiquitous items we all seem to have, and any kind of frozen grain. It could be kale, it could be collards. Of course, they all have their own individual sort of unique properties, but this is just good cut leaf spinach frozen that I thawed and then pressed all the excess liquid out of. So these are, they're not dry, they're still moist, but again, just trying to get any excess liquid out of there. That is a cup of spinach, and then lastly, a cup of fire-roasted diced tomatoes, or even crushed tomatoes. Now, tomatoes are fantastic vegetable/fruit, depending on how you want to use them. I love having the fire roasted one because they have that little bit of char which sort of caramelizes and brings out some of the natural sweetness of the tomato, and they all have their own sort of liquid in there. And there's a can right here that I'm using as a utensil holder now. I always have them on the shelf, whether I'm making chili, again, soups, stews. It's just a great thing to have on hand. They last a really long time. You can find them on sale, sometimes as low as 50 cents a piece, and again, last for a long time. So I did not drain the liquid out of that because I kind of want that to be a part of this dish. And then let me set these into the sink for a second. Fresh garlic. Now, if you don't have fresh garlic, of course you can use powdered or dehydrated or dried. I'm not a fan at all of the garlic that comes already in a jar that's already minced. This is kind of watery. Again, if you don't have anything else, that's fine, but fresh first. And garlic, being an antimicrobial and an antifungal, it lasts a long time. So if you go to a larger market, sometimes you can find a 1 pound sort of a container of refrigerated, already peeled garlic, or you buy the whole garlic heads. They last a very long time. So I'm going to put 2 cloves worth of garlic into this mess. And I like to have the bite of garlic. I like having actual strong pieces. And so depending on how, how woofy or how pungent your garlic is, you can use more or less. You can put it through a garlic press if you want to, if you like that, that shape better. But just doing a rough chop. And at the moment that you're chopping them, you're releasing those essential oils. And so, of course, it smells like garlic before you chop it, but once you chop it, that's what really wakes it up. So I'm going to put these nice big pieces in here. And then little salt and pepper. This is a salt and white pepper blend that I make called Out of the Blue. It's named after my friend Sarah has a gourmet shop up in Blue Ridge, Georgia. And so I use this as kind of my salt blend for everything. But a little salt, a little pepper. Salt is a natural extractant. It brings out some of those flavors. And if you've ever seen my shows before, I say that all the time. And they're like, oh my God, Hans is saying the same things again. And this is mainly whole fennel seed, a little bit more white pepper in there, just for some flavor. However you want to spice this thing. If you're taking it into a spicy direction, if you like spicy foods, you can add things like, Tabasco or sriracha. But just having a simple mix like this is a wonderful salad on its own. This is the kind of thing that if you're looking for a side dish, for a piece of fish, if you're going through the freezer and you've had those, fillets of salmon in there for too long and it's time to use those up, this would make a nice base for that, for a piece of fish or a grilled chicken breast. In our house, we're mostly vegetarian. I'd say about, 75% vegetarians in the house here. So this is the kind of thing that we would eat, quite regularly. A little drizzle of olive oil, and I would say for this amount, it's probably about 2 tablespoons. Again, I don't ever measure anything, but that's the idea being that oil becomes the vehicle that brings all those flavors together. So this becomes, in my mind, kind of like a mother sauce or a base that I can eat it just like this. I can eat it cold, room temperature, or hot, or I can mix it into things. This would be a wonderful base for a soup with some, vegetable stock or chicken stock. It would be great tossed in with some cooked pasta and make either a cold or a hot pasta salad. Or you can do something like a frittata. And so that's my plan. I'm trying to see that we're gonna make a frittata here in a second, but I want to let Ellen talk a bit about the sort of food side of this, and maybe she can speak to that whole oligosaccharides, or maybe pronounce it better than I can. Ellen, are you with us there?
I'm here.
Good, good. Well, pick up where I left off while I start getting the things ready for the frittata here.
Absolutely. Some people may, as you explained, some people may experience gas with beans or certain grains. And as you said, it's actually a fermentable type of oleosaccharide, or saccharide meaning a sugar. Some of these short chain sugars, when you break them down, for the most part, they can pass right through and not be a problem. But for some people, they can cause gas because they're good bacteria. So as you mentioned, we like them, but sometimes when bacteria feed on them, it actually produces a gas, in this case, hydrogen from those little saccharides. So while some people this may happen with beans, it may happen with the grain. And the only way you can really tell which ones are causing the gas is sort of to eliminate that one and then introduce another one and sort of do a trial and error to see which ones cause the gas. The thing to keep in mind is that for those who do not have a stomach, where these go in your intestines, that's where that gas is produced, and that is why sometimes you get that bloated feeling. And the only way to avoid that is to just avoid that particular food that caused it. So a lot of times I recommend people just keep a diary of what they've eaten and when they experience those symptoms, so that they can use that to track back and try to eliminate the foods that are causing the gas and discomfort.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ellen. I appreciate that. I I was definitely struggling with the pronunciation of of the oglio. I'm never going to get that right, but I know what it is, and definitely now having a little bit of input there. So, but I have noticed that when I first read about the idea of using a bay leaf, I thought that seemed like sort of quackery, but it has made a difference. And also, again, changing out that water from the overnight soaking water. Because I used to, just for convenience, I would soak them overnight and then just start over, just bring it to a boil at that point. But there definitely seems to be a difference between the amount of gassiness. Not that, for some of you that maybe don't know me, I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing when it comes to that sort of thing, but, every meal, whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, ends up, with that being the net result. So, all right, enough said. So what I have cracked 3 eggs in a bowl, and so we're going to turn this base salad that we've made into a frittata. And the great thing about a frittata is if you love omelets, but you fear the technical part of making a nice, perfect, fluffy, and then folded omelet, a frittata is sort of the messy way of making an omelet. And so if it breaks, if it sticks, you can always call it then rustic. Rustic is the perfect culinary Band-Aid. So when you're working on something and it falls apart or it sticks to the edge or whatever, then you just melt cheese over the top if you can eat cheese. And they have some wonderful vegan cheeses out there now. So one way or the other, you can garnish or melt or brown it to the point where you can say, oh, this is a rustic frittata. So I love the word rustic. That's I think that's a great, especially if you're a novice in the kitchen or you doubt your culinary skills, you can use that. So I've put just a little spray of avocado oil into my skillet, and I'm using avocado oil because it has a high smoking point. Now, the smoking point really just refers to the point at which an oil begins to smoke. Olive oil has a pretty decent smoking point, but extra virgin olive oil, while it's great for salads, it's not so great for high temperature cooking. Now, I'm not doing a severely high temp, but usually if I'm doing, anything above sort of a medium hot pan, I prefer to use things like avocado oil, grapeseed oil, let's see, there's a whole bunch of rice bran oil works really well. So the higher smoking point is what I'm looking for. So just because it's sitting right here and looking at me, I feel obligated to use, again, a little more garlic. Love it in any way that I can get it in there. I was told that my Oma, my German grandmother, hated garlic. And that is a gene that I did not inherit because I'd like to put it pretty much in everything. But the great thing about having something in the bottom here, whether it's an onion or it's even diced potatoes, something to get it kind of moving around before I add the eggs, kind of helps the non-stick of it all. If you go eggs first, oftentimes that's what wants to kind of cling to the pan. But if you can get something kind of moving around in here to kind of prime the pan, season the pan, that's a great way to kind of get things going. I do want to mention that we have this video now on the Gastric Cancer Foundation's website, which is just gastriccancer.org. I know there was some concern for folks that weren't very Facebook savvy or knowing what's going on. Hopefully they somehow get the fact that I'm saying that you can watch this on the GCF's website, which again is just gastriccancer.org. So garlic, and I've got about, cup or so of our salad into the skillet. And since everything was already prepared, I'm not really trying to overcook this. I mean, all I'm doing really is warming it through. And then I'm going to take our beaten eggs. I got 3 eggs, and I'm lucky enough we have a little small flock of chickens, and these 3 eggs I picked up today on the way inside because our chickens are pretty good about producing about 4 or 5 eggs a day. And so these are crazy fast eggs, but you can use store-bought eggs, of course. But they're, when it comes to digestion, early on after my surgery, after my gastrectomy, eggs were a little tough on my system. But now, being quite a bit out from that, I eat them almost every day, and it's a great source of protein. For me, it's easy to digest. So what I'm doing is I'm just moving this around a little bit to kind of build up some volume. This is kind of an omelet trick as well. So until this thing fully sets, I'm trying to kind of pull it back and then make sure that I can still fill in the hole that I just created with some of the wet egg and bean mixture here. And that's a beautiful thing on its own, just like that. And so once that starts to build up some volume and set a little bit, I'm going to add some cheese, and this is just a 3-cheese blend. I'm going to make a nice little topping here, and I have the oven on broil. Now, the broiler is kind of a dangerous thing in that you can easily overcook something seriously fast. And so even though I love high temp broiler, I'd usually do it on a low setting and put it on the middle rack, because if I do it on the super top rack, it can, in a very quick time, turn into a blackened frittata, which, believe me, is not delicious, and plus you've wasted your time. I'm not worried about wasting the ingredients because these are very inexpensive things. I mean, I don't have $2, maybe $2.25 in this entire dish. So if you mess it up, you mess it up. It's not the end of the world. But going into the broiler, and actually, yeah, this is not too hot. I'm going to go ahead and let it sit on the top here for a second. But I'm going to turn the light on because I want to make sure that I am not burning that sucker. So we'll let that go just for a second. We're doing this real time. Now, I haven't been able to see the screen. Hopefully folks are popping in and checking in. I'm going to say a big general hello again if you're jumping in a little late on the live, or this will actually be recorded, for lack of a better word, and will live on Facebook. So if you, for some reason, missed the live portion of this today, we are planning on doing a segment very much like this throughout the month of April, every Thursday at the same time, which is 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific. Or I think we have our friend is in Russia. It's probably 7 hours ahead there now. So I do have folks from all over the place watching this, which I think is pretty awesome. Some stomached, some stomachless, it's hard to say. Some with partial stomachs, but all of this is perfect for really anybody that eats food. You know, sometimes people say, why would I watch this? I don't have gastric cancer. I've never heard of gastric cancer. Well, I was a chef prior to losing my stomach. I lived for a good 7 years with a half a stomach and then had the rest of it removed back in 2011, I think. So I've sort of been through all the stages, and what I found is the things that really work well for me kind of work well for everybody. We all tend to eat a little too much. We eat a little too much meat. We feel miserable after we eat, and so just paying attention, even though my plumbing is a lot different than others might be. I know I have some stomachless friends out there that are watching. The reality is just being mindful and tuned in to what it is you're putting into your machine is really an important thing. We're not quite there. You're looking pretty good. I'm going to let that kind of go for another minute. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off in case I get to talking a little too much. It's not going to continue to cook. But my point being, every Thursday, 4 o'clock in the month of April, we're going to do this again. And I would encourage you to think of the questions you want to ask. Somebody just asked a question about a good vegan cheese. I hate to endorse one product or the other, but I can tell you in our family, we like the Daiya brand, D-A-I-Y-A, I think. It has been the best as far as, you're always trying to emulate the original thing. There's a lot of good vegan food that I feel like they shouldn't even compare it to a hamburger. Like when you get like a quinoa patty or a chickpea or a grain patty. Yes, it's going between two pieces of bread, and so you can say it's a burger, but you're oftentimes trying to emulate the thing that is the vegan version. So with cheese, or the vegan cheese, that Daiya brand for us has been the one that has sort of the best mouthfeel. It melts the best. Some of the earlier versions, if you haven't tried them since the 90s or early 2000s, they were very plasticky. So even though they might have tasted well, the sort of consistency wasn't anything like what you were hoping for. So obviously, all of this stuff is very, very personal. Like what I might love, you might not like so much. So it's a good thing to try them out before you go and buy the jumbo bag of whatever it is. Buy a smaller one. Or obviously right now, not many markets are doing public tastings. But when things get back to normal, places like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's where they do a lot of public samples, that's a great way to kind of go and try a small bite of something before committing to the, because some of these things can be a little pricey when you're getting into the alternate meats and things. But again, the thing that I'm making now, which I've sort of called the bingo salad, bingo being sometimes you're surprised or, you get random numbers thrown at you and all of a sudden you win. It's like, oh, I won something. And when I was looking in the pantry, I kind of felt like I was like, okay, E12 and B9. I felt like I was just sort of just randomly grabbing things and came up with something that worked out quite well. And so I kind of felt like it was a bingo moment. So for lack of a better term, this is the bingo salad that we made. And this becomes, of course, again, the bingo frittata. This looks gorgeous to me. Now, back in my old life, this would be one serving for me. But now if I can eat half of this, I'm doing pretty well. So what I typically do is, so I'm not pushing myself to eat too much, is I'll go ahead and divide it into 4 and eat one, see how I feel, give it 10, 12 minutes. And if I feel like I'm still hungry, still can eat something, I will go ahead and get another slice. And this is quite good cold, by the way. Many times I'll make something like this, throw it in the fridge, and the next day just eat a cold slice straight out. I mean, it's sort of a pizza consistency, but it has that egginess. But I think with a lot of us, we overeat because the excitement of the moment of chewing and the flavors and everything is that if you have it all in front of you, you will eat it all. And when, as a waiter back in the 90s, there was a trend for people asking for a to-go box as soon as their food was delivered. And I always thought that was such a weird thing. And people would immediately divide their meal in half, put it into the to-go box, and that was their own way of controlling portion. They didn't want to overeat. So that was mainly for, I think, more weight loss. Of course, I'm in the boat now where I'm trying to gain weight. But the reality is, if I eat too much in one time, it can make me ill. It causes something called latent dumping syndrome. And basically, if I eat it too fast, I don't get the full benefits of the food. So it's better for me to eat more often throughout the day. And so just portioning it correctly and eating what you can, give it a few minutes, see how you feel. There's nothing wrong with going back to it 3 or 4 times as opposed to wolfing it all down at once, which is a problem that I think a lot of folks have, not just stomach cancer patients, but people in general tend to overeat. We eat too much, too fast, too often. So divide it in 4 and see what you think there. Ellen, I'm going to throw back to you for a second. Let's talk about eggs, because eggs are one of those things I feel like in nutrition that, for a while there, eat your eggs, and then it was like, only eat the whites, and then it was like, no, you can eat the whole egg again. And I feel like as a sort of an armchair quarterback nutritionist guy, that has flip-flopped. So what's today's version on eggs? Are we good to eat eggs?
Today's version on eggs is good news. The cholesterol that is naturally in eggs does not raise your blood cholesterol. What raises blood cholesterol is the saturated fat. So if you make your eggs in a whole lot of butter, it's the butter that is going to raise your cholesterol, not the egg itself. So eggs, as you know, are a great source of protein, easily digestible for most people. And there is no reason for you to avoid eggs for fear of what it will do to your blood cholesterol.
Perfect.
So
Yep.
enjoy that frittata.
Well, thank you. That has been the thing that, again, same was with butter, and of course you remember in the 90s where everything was fat-free and then everything was sugar-free and then everything was low-cal, and it's sometimes hard to keep up with those things. And honestly, right now with gluten-free, I know there are people that have serious gluten issues, and I know that that's something that, celiacs, but there are also people that are just going to gluten-free because they heard somebody lost weight. Well, the reality is, if they're not eating the types of foods that they were eating and switching to a more limited diet, the quick result might be that they're losing some pounds, but sort of understanding what the trend is and why it's happening, I think, helps you get a better sense of food. Like anything, when you first start learning about something, it's overwhelming, and there's so many opinions, and right now, especially online, you can find anybody saying anything. And not to pick on my mom, but my mom will say, Dr. Oz says we shouldn't do whatever. And I'll say, well, why not? Well, I don't know. Case in point with tempeh, which is a fermented soybean product, he on national television took a bite of plain tempeh and said, this tastes terrible. But it's actually a fantastic ingredient. So if I were to take, just a bite of baking flour and say, this is terrible, people would think, I shouldn't use flour because it tastes terrible. So oftentimes the public perception of a food is so influenced by, the conversation around it. And so just because you've heard that it's not a good thing, do your research and do your homework on it, because the facts and opinions do change throughout time. As we learn more, it's amazing like how little we know, how much we do know, and yet how little we don't know about our own bodies. And I know we've had this conversation before that even the little bacteria can even affect your mood. It can affect your mental health. So I was lucky enough to do a presentation at the Porsche North American headquarters here a while back. And I've been using that analogy that you wouldn't go and spend $60,000 on a Porsche and put pancake syrup in that engine and expect it to run, much less at peak performance. Yet we do that to our bodies all the time. And so really being mindful and paying attention, especially at a time where your financial resources might be limited, your availability of getting fresh and wholesome ingredients might be a bit limited. Now's the time to be really mindful about what are we putting into our machines, how is it affecting our bodies, and because ultimately we're the ones, unless you're being force-fed, you're the one making the decision of what goes into that machine. So that's the kind of stuff that I love to think about, not in a weird, over-critical way, but in kind of a celebratory way, because again, every day I get to make the decision, do I want to feel fresh, vibrant, and healthy, or do I want to feel overcooked and overprocessed and greasy and fatty and lethargic? And that's, in my opinion, what food can do for us. So rather than worrying every day about how do I spend less time in the kitchen, I'm always trying to find ways to spend more time in the kitchen. And taking this little challenge of making something that's visually appealing and delicious and sort of utilitarian out of things I already had on hand, I think was kind of a fun little challenge, and I'm going to continue doing that. And my wife always hates that I end up, again, I go to the store and I end up with so many things that I'm excited about. Oh, this looks good. And they go on a shelf, and then you would almost need an archaeologist to get back down to them, because then the things that we buy routinely end up stacking on top of them. And so it is now a good time to spend some time in your pantry, clean some things out. If the spices you have on hand, like if the dried dill looks like sawdust and doesn't smell like anything, throw it out, reevaluate kind of what you have on hand. Do we have any other questions? I don't even know. I'm losing track of time. I just talk and talk and talk, and I have the gift of the gab for sure. I think we're coming up on, how long we got here, Hewitt? I'm checking with my... It's 4:30. It's 4:30. Well, so I'm still happy to keep talking food. Do we have any questions coming in? I don't even know if we have. Just the one. Well, that's cool. Ellen, anything that I didn't cover that we should talk about, and all the fun stuff that we're looking at here?
No, I think you did a great job. Again, I like what you said about everybody is different. Many ingredients in those salads are perfect, but for one person, the beans could cause a gastric or some sort of gas, whereas another person, it may be the grain. So it's just a matter of experimenting and seeing if you're having any sort of bloating or discomfort, what actually is causing it. It may not be all the ingredients, but just one. And the other thing I'd like to just add from a food safety standpoint is make sure whatever salads or beans you make, keep them in the refrigerator until you're ready to use them again.
That's a really good point. What I want to mention there too, you made me think of something. Oftentimes when somebody sees a meals like this, or they hear the benefits of beans or brown rice or juicing or something like that, they jump in it head first and kind of overdo it. And so I often use the analogy, it's like exercise. If you decide tomorrow that I'm going to start doing, a weightlifting routine, and you go for the heaviest weights and you do the most reps you possibly can, well, the next 2 days you're going to feel like you've been bludgeoned to death, and you can barely lift your arms to brush your teeth. And so it's the same with eating these types of foods. If you're not used to eating a lot of beans, well, yeah, you're going to have a couple of days of sort of GI noises happening there. Same with fresh sauerkraut and all these sorts of foods that are really healthy. But oftentimes people who haven't been eating them and have been on sort of a more drive-through diet, when they switch to a healthier style of living, it takes a while for the bacteria in your gut to really sort of, it's like a changing of the guards. So you're sort of starving the bad bacteria or the current residents, and you're introducing foods for the new residents. And so there's going to be a little bit of a changing of the guards happening. So stick with it. I mean, don't be sort of intimidated by the fact that you had a little GI distress. see it as a sign that, hey, this is working, and you try to introduce more of those foods as you go along. It's, again, much like exercise. You kind of want to ease yourself into it and then maintain that. It's not just having one healthy meal and all of a sudden you're healthy. It's a lifestyle. It's a commitment. So good talking points all around. Just to review, let's go back to our sort of bingo salad. It was really just a simple 4-ingredient with a couple add-ons. It was cooked navy beans, about a cup, cooked barley, drained as well, and about a cup, 1 cup of the fire-roasted diced tomatoes, and a cup of frozen spinach that was thawed and then the liquid pressed out. So we have 4, so the yield is 4 cups. Now, I used 1 cup of that into my 3-egg frittata here. So the remaining 3 cups can be a side dish, it can be a salad eaten straight as, it can be mixed into pasta, it can be added with some stock and turned into a nice hearty soup. And even the pasta dish can be turned into a soup. I did season this with just a little bit of garlic, fresh garlic. I had 2 cloves in that 4-cup mix there. I had a little bit of salt and pepper, a little bit of dried fennel seed, but that's really to your taste. I mean, honestly, just some salt and pepper would give it a nice seasoning. With salt, I never really want to taste the salt. I just want it to kind of bring out the natural, the natural essence of each of the ingredients. As I mentioned before, salt is a natural extractant. So sometimes you're going to end up with a little more liquid than you started with because it's going to pull some of that out of each of the ingredients. So know that if you put this in the fridge and you come back to it, you might have to drain it, especially if you're doing something where you don't need that excess liquid. If you're eating it as a salad, it's fine, but if you're using it, if it gets too watery, just run it through a quick colander or a chinois, get some of that excess liquid out of there. Nothing wrong with the liquid, but again, depending on what you're using it for, just be mindful that as it sits there, it will sometimes weep a little bit, and so you just want to keep that liquid to a minimum. Now, so we got a week until we do our next live one, but in the meantime, we have a whole series of videos in this kitchen. It's called the Gesundheit Kitchen, and you can find it right on gastriccancer.org. We have a whole nutrition series that you can watch there, and we've done, gosh, I don't know how many episodes we've done. We've done a lot of them, but they're all basically in this same sort of spirit. They are meant to be easy, nutritional. You don't have to have any weird ingredients necessarily. I always try to, if I do use a weird ingredient, I always try to, give you options for a less weird option. Being a chef, you do like to kind of push the boundaries a little bit from time to time, but I do tend to focus on foods that are great for gastric cancer patients and their caregivers. But again, I have found that so many GC patients or people that had never heard of stomach cancer benefit from this, and to me that's fantastic when somebody comes to me and say, I thought I hated okra, or I thought I hated Brussels sprouts until I tried it the way that you did it. And so I love the feedback. If there's something that you want to see next week or on future Gesundheit Kitchen episodes, take a minute and send them in. If you have nutrition questions, again, we're going to be doing this for a few more weeks, so if you have a question, there's a good chance that there are several other people out there that have the same question. They're just too intimidated or too embarrassed to ask. But when you're talking about removing, a major organ out of your GI tract, I always kind of joke, I don't have a GI doctor anymore, I just have an eye doctor because the G part is gone. But if you have that question, I guarantee you there's several people around the world that have that same question. So don't be embarrassed or afraid to ask. And if you'd rather send it by a private message on Facebook, we can talk about that on the next as well. So again, gastriccancer.org. We're going to be doing this every Thursday at 4 Eastern. Right here on gastriccancer.org or on Facebook Live. And I appreciate you guys hanging out with me in the kitchen, and we will meet you in the kitchen next Thursday. Until then, take care of yourself. Gesundheit. Want some? I'll fax it to you.